You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Business is Boring. How do brands reinvent themselves and stay relevant in a fast-changing world that's only changing faster? That's the specialty area of thinking of today's guest on the podcast, who honed his approach working with celebrities in Hollywood and has taken this thinking into brand, technology and media, especially in his role as the Vice President and Head of Innovation at Vice Media. Mark Adams, based out of Dubai, was recently in town for the SparkLab Future State event, New Realities. He's a serial entrepreneur and award-winning global thought leader who's driven by a mission to democratize his knowledge and digitally upskill 10 million people by 2025, and he's travelled to over 100 countries so far in pursuit of this cause. Mark's sessions at the event were raw, honest and hilarious takes on the state of marketing, creativity and innovation, and it's such a privilege to have him on today. Thank you for joining us, Tanakwe.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Hey, so first up, how was it that you got into the world of entertainment in Hollywood?
You know, honestly, I do truly believe that there's, that expression that some people, achieve greatness and some people have it thrust upon them. And some people just lie and make up a load of nonsense and then realize they don't know how to do what they've just told everyone they're going to do. And that was me. So I just happened to be, I'm from a little town. I'm actually back there right now outside of London called Essex. And, as I was saying when I was on stage with you guys, everybody here is a wannabe DJ. It's literally it is, you would never meet anybody that's not, especially men. And so I just wanted to run a club night. That's all I wanted to do. And the only way I could book artists was by offering something that wasn't money, because I didn't have any money, still don't. But yeah, so at that time, I just, the only thing I could think to offer these artists that wasn't money was to look after their digital, which I was barely capable of doing, but I just kind of made a bigger deal of it and they stupidly believed me.
That's awesome. And how did that take you to America and working with celebrities?
Yeah, that was random. So it was basically myself and a mate, and we approached a nightclub in London, which is our temple, called Fabric. So some of you, I'm sure you will know. It's we used to live there basically, and we just thought, it was our dream, our kind of teenage dream to run a little night there. So we went there and said, would you consider, doing a night, but more kind of for students really? And they basically told us to get stuffed. And I understand that because they're a very respected brand. The last thing they want is people like me in there. And so, really the way they told us to get stuff, because they're so nice, they didn't want to just tell us to get lost. So what they said was, look, the only way that we'll really be open to this idea is if you can book the artists that we've never really been able to book. And now, anybody with half a brain would think, well, if you can't book them, how the hell are these two first-year students going to be able to book them? But we were so clueless, and the power of ignorance is just such a wonderful thing that we were like, sure, give us the list. And on the list, it was like Daft Punk, The Prodigy, right? So, it was like all the biggest electronic music artists in the world, Chemical Brothers, etc., and some others, Björk and people like that. And, we were very geeky guys. We didn't have many, I'll be honest, it wasn't like we had loads of mates, and we certainly didn't have the pleasure of having a romantic partners. And what you tend to find about people like that is that they're disproportionately good at digital, I would say. So we basically, we thought, okay, let's try and, find a way to book, the first one was Daft Punk actually. And we realized that was going to be quite expensive. And, for some reason, I've never fully understood why, but the agent just wasn't, that enamored by our pitch, which was, it's £1 drinks, we can get Daft Punk as many drinks as they want. He was like, I don't care about that. So yeah, long story short, we ended up saying, okay, well, that's not going to happen. And then it's actually my brother, who has always been kind of my younger, but also older brother, in the sense that he's just smarter and just more technically capable and effective than I am. And he was like, well, man, think about what one thing we can do is maybe offer them digital. So why don't we look at we did a kind of audit of their digital presence. And actually it was actually Björk that first said yes. So I had this bizarre experience of flying to Iceland when she was performing at this festival, and I had to be backstage literally with her and her team passing a joint around, and I had to like just smoke this joint. I was pretty sure it wasn't just cannabis as well, and I'm there kind of explaining the internet while smoking a joint with her and the team. And then at the end, I remember after about 5 minutes, she was like, okay, so the internet is like a tree. And I was like, yeah. And in a weird way, she was actually bang on about that. But yeah, so she was the first person that ever agreed to play our show. And so we did her digital. We sorted out her website and her new album launch, and we looked across all the digital landscape to try and fix all that. And in return, she played our show for free. So that was the beginning. And then more and more artists actually started to come to us, and actually the same. We worked with Faithless then, who were incredibly popular here in the UK, and then the same manager that managed Faithless was also the manager of Radiohead, one of my personal favourite bands ever. And so Radiohead were having this period with their label where the label wanted to release a best of Radiohead. And if you know Radiohead, they are not a best of type of band. So they were up in arms about this, and they basically told the label, if you do that, that'll be the last album we ever release on this label. And the label were like, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to get, how are you going to do your thing if you don't have a label? And that was a fair question. And Brian, who was the manager, came to us and said, if we wanted to release an album without a label, how would we do it? And it seemed obvious to us in the time of LimeWire and all this stuff, that most people were going to download that album for free anyway. So we said, well, why don't you just put it up, and then just people can pay whatever they want for it. So you kind of swerve that piracy problem that was endemic at the time before the streaming services like Spotify. And that really put us on the map. Like, everybody started coming to us after that going, oh my God, can you help us?
That was amazing. I mean, that was some of the biggest news in the world when that album was put up in a pay what you want way.
We had no understanding of what we were doing. And when it finally went out, what was amazing was that it actually, and this shows you the power of community in some sense. You would think most people would go on and say, well, I'm going to pay 1 penny for that album because you've been offered basically to take it for nearly free. They didn't. The diehard Radiohead fans went on and paid. Some of them paid more money than they would have paid to buy it in the shops, because it was a transmission of their fandom and their love for the band. And even the fact the band had done this meant, even though we were thinking about this very technically, it kind of ended up feeling to the community like a contribution. And they actually, there was thousands of fans that paid over $100 for the album when they could have paid 1 penny. It was crazy.
Amazing. And that kind of growth of, so you kind of accidentally, but you make it sound very kind of light and easy, like you didn't know what you're doing. But the amount of work going on in the background to, make all that stuff come off must be extraordinary. There's a great line, say yes and find a way. It sounds like you're exceptional and have been exceptional at finding a way to make all of these things stick, right?
I'm a massive believer in. This is an interesting kind of subject that I've been exploring with my brother for quite a long time, about the idea of kind of making what I would call irreversible contracts. There's something really powerful about telling people you're going to do something and your ass being on the line. And if you can't pull it off, and what's amazing is the human being, I don't believe innovation comes from any comfort zones, right? Innovation comes when we have to innovate. And that was what happened to us. And I never had words for that then, but I guess nowadays that sounds like a really business way of saying what I meant was I was shitting myself. And my buddy who I ran it with, Luke, was shitting himself and saying, why the fuck did you agree to this? And it was pure stress and pain. But, we kind of just pulled it out of the bag, at the last minute. And that was a real, honestly, like I think back on that literally was put us in a totally different path in our lives. And we're still at university, and then lots of artists started to come to us after that, and it really took off. And then weirdly, that was when we got a cease and desist letter from the biggest talent agency in the world, which is William Morris Endeavour. And if you ever watch Entourage, it's kind of based loosely on William Morris. And the letter basically was from their legal team saying, we don't know what you're doing, but what you're doing is you're procuring our artists who are under agreement with us to play shows for free, and you're cutting out us as the agent and going directly to the manager or the artist in some sense. And we are going to sue you. We're going to take you to court. And actually, I know now there was no legal basis for that. It was just to try and spark fear. And it did, because we were terrified. And what we said was, look, please don't sue us. Like, we're just kids. We don't have any money, But then once we did the Radiohead thing, they actually changed their tune, and they were like, come into the office. And we went to meet, I'll never forget this, we met a guy called Mark Geiger. And I really mean this to say that I haven't seen Mark Geiger for a very, very long time, but he will never know how much he changed my life and my business partner Luke's life as well, because he came into the room with a totally different attitude. He wasn't coming in to tell us off. He came in to try and understand what the hell it was we were doing to get their artists to play these shows for free. And once we explained it and said, look, we think the value chain of music is missing a very important piece, which is that digital piece, and nobody's really doing it, he was like, right, okay. And then the next thing we knew, we were on a flight to LA to go and meet Ari Emanuel, who's the head of William Morris, and explain the whole thing over again. And yeah, it was mad. And then so we ended up the business was acquired, and we ended up within the William Morris machine. So it was amazing.
That sounds like an absolute dream, like a series of improbable events, like the show Entourage, which is based on that agency and that Ari. How was that as a kind of series of because they're pretty improbable events, right? Like get on backstage with Björk. Get, Radiohead's incredibly anticipated album is in your lap as to the thing to find a launch for. Like, phenomenal. And then next thing you know, you're in Hollywood.
And, the most important thing is it wasn't only us. Like, there was two lovely ladies within ATC, which is Courtyard Management, which managed Faithless and Radiohead and a few others. These lovely ladies, Prue and Claire, like, it was at least, 50% of their thinking, and they were kind of they were marketing experts. We were just idiots that understood digital landscape. So it was weird because they were like, they understood like the high level concepts, but we just understood like, yeah, well, you could do that, like nothing stopping you, like just put a landing page up, like so we were kind of interpreting what they were talking about, and then we were kind of maybe giving them some ideas that maybe they didn't know were possible at the time. But I think the expression of it was definitely, and the way it was executed was all them. But I think the general idea of it was us, and it was just an amazing. I honestly that was a game changer. And then when we went out to William Morris, by that time we were actually deep in another campaign because we kind of started long story short, like we'd been really early onto Facebook, obviously, because my mate Luke was at London School of Economics, and that was where the first place that Facebook actually happened outside of the US. And so we were building, and by the way, anybody could have done this, like anyone with any amount of knowledge could have done this. And all we were doing was we were creating society groups for all the potential sub-tribes of communities that existed within all the different universities. So it was labor intensive and boring, but it worked. So we'd start up LSE football group on Facebook. Then we'd start like LSE Arts and Drama Society. And because we were basically the page owners, they just self-populated. We just ping it to the people that ran those things. And then when it started to spread to different universities, Oxford and Cambridge, we started to do that for them as well. So we were actually sitting on like thousands at one point of groups. And this would all be completely illegal now. But it was such a wild, wild west then that nobody was really paying attention. And long story short, we realized we had, very quickly we had these groups with literally tens of thousands of people on. And then we started thinking, like, what else can we do with this? Because, we don't have anything to direct it at. So, one of my friends, John, who's actually a good Essex lad as well, he had this idea about stopping Simon Cowell from getting to number one. And Simon Cowell had like 4 number ones in a row for Christmas. And it's just a thing in the UK. The Christmas number one is like a thing. I don't know why. But Simon Cowell had managed to get his X Factor winner to the Christmas number one for 4 years in a row. And we just thought, why not? It'll be fun. Let's see what this kind of network of networks can do. So we just directed all these networks at, this idea that, stop Simon Cowell from getting to number one. And that didn't really work because we didn't really have an alternative. So then John Morter, who's an absolutely brilliant, smart guy, he was like, well, we need to put an alternative out there. So he came up with the idea that we should try and get Rage Against the Machine, Killing in the Name to Christmas number one, which obviously had, been in the top 50, I think, many, many years before, but has 36 uses of the F word in it. And we just thought it'd be so funny, like families all gathered around at Christmas. And the Christmas number one is like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, fuck you. So that went to number one. And and that was it. Like that, everybody knew then and everyone was coming at us. But by that point, we were really deep in the discussions with William Morris, and we kind of quickly after that, we joined them, and that was it. And then we just did exactly that, but for 7 years across actors and celebrities and even, politicians. We worked with Obama, we worked with, Buckingham Palace. It was surreal, honestly. It was fun.
Yeah, so cool. And in those roles, working with, celebrities and public figures and the like, you're kind of like playing an interpreter role, right? Like, hey, this is how you deal with digital, talk to people who are online first, communicate in ways that are relevant. And it feels like over that last kind of, the last kind of 10, 15 years, we've gone from celebrities and public figures that were kind of like monarchs, and there's only a couple of them left, your Elton Johns and your Mariah Careys, like these kind of figures of the imagination. But all the rest of them have become these kind of, friends in our pockets, these digital entities. That must have been a fascinating thing to be part of, driving that strategy at such a kind of influential agency.
I think, honestly, I truly believe that my whole career has just been a litany of failures, because if you look at anything I was attempting to achieve and you then analyze whether or not I achieved that, you will in all instances see that I failed, like every time. So at William Morris, what I was basically trying to convince celebrities and A-listers was, guys, there's going to be a whole new category of celebrity, or let's call it, we didn't have the word influencer necessarily then, but it was this idea that these tools are going to give everybody an opportunity to create content at any frequency and distribute it at scale. And honestly, it was really hard, trying to get Hugh Jackman to go from saying I'm going to make 2 movies a year to I'm going to post, a video on Facebook like every day. It was really, really difficult to do. And I think, it's testament to the fact that we totally failed, that those A-listers, as you mentioned, no longer have that status in society, So I think in terms of, I would give us a D- for our success in trying to convince Hollywood and the kind of A-list community that making 2 movies a year was not going to be the future of the digital and media landscape. But some did, and then of course we moved into that second tier of the others. But I think your point is so bang on. I don't know if we're going to see. I don't know if our kids' generation will have celebrity in the way that we have it, Like, I think maybe like a Lady Gaga or a Beyonce may well be the last ever like global celebrity in that regard. This is a controversial opinion. I don't know if I'm right about this, and history will probably prove me wrong, but genuinely, like, because the bottom line of it is, where the media landscape is so fragmented that most of Gen Z conversations, as far as I can ascertain, is someone making an in-joke about something they know about, and the other person says, I've no idea what you're talking about.
That's also the conversations with so the people who aren't in Gen Z talking to people in Gen Z, isn't it?
Yes. That's probably what your listeners are thinking right now. Like, what the hell is these people talking about?
And what did you learn from what the people who were successful at reinventing themselves? Because that's something that you have then been able to, help brands and businesses kind of understand as well. And it's so fascinating because, I follow, the NBA, and it's been really interesting seeing on the NBA how, during the finals, as they're kind of, people that they had simple narratives around, your LeBron Jameses didn't end up going as far as they had hoped. Suddenly, the kind of PR machine kicked into gear and it went, oh, heck, we'd better talk about how awesome some of these people are that we've ignored up to this point are. And then, you actually see them change gear. And before the draft, you see the publicity machine kick into gear and they start making the celebrities out of the people that are going to be leading the draft. And it's such a machine. It's such a machine to kind of to view. And it's just all best practice marketing, right? And so, when you're working at that intersection of culture, celebrity, marketing, entertainment industry, it's like you're doing product launches, but they're people, right?
Precisely. That's such a good insight. It is. Because I think that, and this is where, when I finally worked in the consumer brand sector, started working with the Coca-Colas or the L'Oreals or the Unilevers and stuff, I was so confused. I honestly thought I was misunderstanding what people were saying, but I actually realized I wasn't misunderstanding it. They just don't think the same way. So when I was going to, in entertainment, it's so obvious. It's so obvious because the celebrity themselves, let's say, like, I remember the day when there was a massive argument about I probably shouldn't say this, but Coachella had a massive argument about who was going to be the headliner. And it ended up coming down to who had the biggest number of fans on social platforms. And I personally, as an art lover and somebody who appreciates, I think all of us do, I think that's a terrible way to do it, really. But on the other hand, when you've got two agents both saying, if the Red Hot Chili Peppers agent is saying they have to headline and Radiohead's agent is saying they have to headline, there's got to be something that ties that breaks the tie. And so I remember they turned around and said, Radiohead will headline because they've got more social connections, basically, across all the different platforms. And, that was a real moment as well, because then the kind of the music industry and the entertainment industry started going, it became like, DJs started to get booked because they had followers. No one even had heard their tracks. And, there was a lot of gamification of that, and I won't lie, like in the beginning of my career, I did a lot of that shit. I'd bust a load of fake profiles on somebody's page, 100%. I think anybody who's been there since the beginning will tell you that we did all that stuff, But, we're talking 10 years ago nearly. But what it started to get to was, because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is where the music industry in particular, it's ultimately the buyer, the person who's buying, in the end, the monetization of the music industry comes from a promoter of a festival or a venue like a Live Nation paying an artist. And what they're basically looking at is how busy is it going to be if I book that artist? How many tickets is that artist worth? So in the end, it's the music business, right? So once they figured that out, it became an absolute scramble for people to try and build their followings and stuff. But what was interesting is when I went to like actual commercial, corporate brands, consumer brands, it was so different. Like, they never thought about building a community that was engaged. They just wanted to they just wanted to do mini TV ads, but all they wanted to do is make short form videos of the product spinning around and stuff. And I was like, but what about it's almost like they were so excited about the opportunity to communicate, but they just didn't consider it as an opportunity to contribute.
broadcast mindset, hey? It'd be like, oh, we got 10 million views. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, and what did you do with all of that attention? Oh, nothing.
Yes.
Nothing at all. We just broadcast at them. And you're like, okay, well, that's an interesting relationship. You just turn up in a room, yell, and leave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, I wish every year I'd think this will be the year when it changes. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, remarkable, hey?
It hasn't changed.
And just we'll jump into the next part, into the 7 habits that you've identified for how brands are able to kind of reinvent themselves. But I think just before we jump there, like, what was it that you saw in Hollywood, which is, the master industry for plotting a career and choosing roles to get to a certain level and, moving from heartthrob to leading man, all of those kind of things, like that kind of planning and that kind of reinvention of your persona in the world. What did you learn from that industry and what did you observe there?
This is such a great question, because even the way you asked it is so insightful, because you that's exactly correct. Everything is a repositioning, like I'll give you an example. Like Taylor Lautner was a client of mine, and I remember his agent saying, like, we've got to get him out of heartthrob world and into some serious roles. And if you look at, say, like Robert Pattinson, he went after Twilight, he went into the A24 deep, dark indie movies, playing serious roles, serious characters. He was, by the end, he was kind of popping up alongside, like, Willem Dafoe in things, he was a serious actor. And then Tenet and Batman brought him back into the kind of mainstream, but credible mainstream, right? That was a masterpiece of brand building. Meanwhile, God bless him, and I'll be honest, he doesn't have any of the same kind of level of talent. But his co-star, who was the in Twilight as well, just went and made rom-coms, fell off the face of the earth. And so you're absolutely right to say that, consumer brands think that they are the masters of thinking about branding, but I actually don't know if they know as much as they think they do. It's quite interesting, So and I actually think that everything that we learn in the world of entertainment in the early 2000s up to maybe 2010 is literally the playbook for how to grow a consumer brand in 2023. So it's all kind of come full circle, because finally consumer brands are saying, right, we need to earn fame, and then we need to use paid media to show people what we've earned, not just. And so, by all means, go for reach and frequency and efficient CPM, keep ideas salient and top of mind, like Brian Sharp says. But what are you going to keep salient and top of mind with all that media tonnage? And so the question really comes down to, well, can you earn something? And, so one of the things I always say to my team is, scale. And the question is, scale what? And if someone in my team came up with this idea that it's a kind of cheesy mnemonic, but it works, is that scale stands for story communicating a love earned. And that's what you should scale. So what you need to scale is a story, a real story that communicates a love that was earned. So you contribute, then you scale that contribution as communication. And that's how all celebrities think, well, or at least their teams do, but it's just not how normal brands think.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll be back in a moment with Mark Adams to talk more about making fans, not customers. Hoki mai anō. We're back with Mark Adams, Vice President and Head of Innovation at Vice Media. Hey, so we've chatted a little bit about, the 7 habits idea that you have. What is the 7 habits, and what can companies learn from those?
I'll be honest, I think I just needed to have 7 of them, because otherwise it wouldn't sound like the 7 habits of highly effective people. One of the things that we talk a lot about is, this distinction between efficiency and effectiveness, right? So, we know that, you can be extremely, there's a great Yogi Bear quote where he says, we're going the wrong way, but we're making great time, right? And I think that's how brands and a lot of boardrooms are. They are really efficient at moving in the wrong way. they're efficiently going the wrong way. And I feel like, when you bring it back to the effectiveness thing, you reframe that, even though they're annoyingly similar words, but, you reframe that as like, what are we doing that's actually effective? And ultimately, let's think, budget, and what we need to do as brands is really our main role, if we're in the marketing function or even as a CEO, is just to, manage that P&L to maintain constant perpetual growth. That is really what it is. And, so, I started to, honestly, most of these principles were stolen with pride from great minds far, far bigger than mine, who I massively respect. And, some of those people I'm lucky enough to still be in contact with. But, people like Mathilde Delhomme, who's the chief brand officer at LVMH, she did about 20 something years at P&G and then moved to LVMH. And, she's been on both sides of what you would call the spectrum of consumers. She's sold, nappies at P&G, and now she's selling, the most expensive Laura Piana or, Dior, so it's just fascinating, and someone like that is such an incredible mind that I've taken so much from. But the way I think about those seven principles is I just realized that I just feel like there's a certain tragedy in working really flipping hard and putting your soul and because I think creativity requires you to put your soul into your work, not just it's not just your intellect. I think everybody who's ever been a creative or a strategist realizes that, you're never not thinking about that brief. It's like you're making a cup of tea, thinking about that brief. You're on a train, thinking about that brief. Like, it's a 24-hour job. You're dreaming about trying to solve that problem. And I just realized that there was something really kind of tragic about the idea that all this effort might be going into effectiveness, but not efficiency. And so I just wanted to get something down. And then at a certain moment in Vice, because the kind of second part of that story was that I was always working with celebrities, and I was at William Morris, and kind of I've been there for 7 years, and I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do next? And I actually got invited to give a talk for Unilever, and I was always really of the belief that I would never work with consumer brands. A, I didn't understand them, and B, I didn't think they had the ability to contribute to the system, and therefore would never have a meaningful role in it. And actually, the guy at the time was Keith Weed. He was the chief marketing officer of Unilever. And he said, look, I want to introduce you to the team at Dove. And I met them. And I realized, they were not joking. They had the intention to contribute. They actually wanted to wage war against this size zero models kind of, what I can only describe it as like a fetish, basically, that existed within popular culture and was, very prevalent in men's magazines and women's magazines. And Dove was kind of taking this real beauty position. And I kind of tested them a couple of times to see if they were really serious about it. And honestly, God, whether they execute perfectly all the time is one question. But at the time, that team in particular were very, very committed. And so I actually thought, yeah, go on then. So we ended up actually developing a campaign that was a real eye-opener for me, and it's called Dove Beauty Sketches, and it's actually the most awarded campaign in the world ever, and it's also, I think, the most effective campaign in terms of the results. It's had literally billions of views. Even years later, it gets millions of views a month. It's insane, and if you have a chance to look at it, just type in Dove Beauty Sketches. But long story short, that kind of opened me up to the idea of consumer brands. And then I kind of thought, oh, well, and then the second thought was, well, actually, there's probably more money in this. So we started a new company doing just consumer brands. And we were digital transformation kind of partners, or whatever you want to call it. And we worked with all the L'Oreals and the Unilevers and the P&Gs and stuff. And then we sold that company to Vice. And I ended up in Vice looking around saying, what is the business model here? And the business model was media and selling ads against content. And I was like, oh shit, this is not going to end well. And for 30 seconds, if you Google around, you'll see that I was not wrong about that, right? And so what me and my team were tasked with doing was starting new business units within Vice that could allow it to basically lessen its dependency on this media advertising model and try to make money in meaningful other ways. So the campaigns framework, which is what we call the 7 steps, was actually designed with that innovation job in mind. But actually, I kind of realized it also applies to developing meaningful and sometimes award-winning kind of brand work as well. So that was how it was developed. We kind of developed it for kind of analyzing potential ideas that we could launch to kind of offset this awful business model of being in the media world.
And Vice, like, music and entertainment, comes from a bunch of kind of communities and niches and networks and people that care about the topics you're covering or the, type of kind of rock and roll news, dropping people behind the lines and war zones who are kind of quasi-celebrities and stuff, like bananas stuff, right? Like, so you've got that kind of connection to the content that's much more like an entertainment product than like a media, typical news media product maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe the news is the same and it just pretends to be different. But yeah, how did you go about identifying, the role of networks and the people at the heart of it, the customer, rather than just thinking about the product and the ads you sell?
Yeah, that was really, you nailed it. That was the shift, right? Because in order to create these new businesses, we couldn't just, because if you think about it, like every media company in the world basically creates content, harvests human attention, and then places ads either before that content, in the middle of that content, or beside that content, in order to try and drive some kind of association and, potentially transaction. And so we really had to think a little bit differently about it. And, myself and my team, I was really, really lucky to have this awesome team. And we just, we started to look at, and so that was when we developed the 7 steps. And like step 1 is catharsis, which I think is just a strong word for honesty. It's the type of honesty that when you say it, you feel like something's come off your chest. So we used to say to ourselves that when we get in the room, we would need not just honesty, but catharsis. Like, oh, fuck, you said it. Well said. Well done. That was honest, So that was step 1. And it was just about saying, and catharsis can be very negative as well as very positive. It can be like, I'll be honest with you, I've always personally had a huge vendetta, and I don't mind saying this. I've had a massive vendetta against the way that the Vice media social channels work. I think it's a terrible, woeful expression of a really important brand. And I was always obsessed with the idea that there was more in this brand than just talking about how much a bag of cocaine costs in different cities and, what dildos do this and that, and so, we had to be, that was catharsis. We had to be honest with ourselves and say, sometimes we wince when we open our own Instagram page and look at our own content from our own teams who are our own dear friends. And we go, oh, what the fuck is this? And so what we realized was that point 2 of the 7 stages is authenticity. So it's like, okay, so now that we've been honest and we've told the truth, what can we authentically say about this brand? And this will work for your brand if you're listening to this, or it'll work for anyone. You could say it about Coca-Cola, anyone. But for Vice, we were saying, well, the one thing you can say about Vice is it is willing to go there in the way that South Park would go there and say that thing that nobody's willing to say. And so in a way, although it's being, I think, mismanaged because they're talking about, frankly, quite glib and silly things, sometimes they are serious things and they're important things. And that led us to this concept that maybe there was a news product, a real news product, like an Emmy award-winning news organization that we could build out of the kind of the tone that had always been in the brand. And so that led us to that. And that's actually step 3 of the system. It spells out the word campaigns, mainly because I want brands to think about it. But step A is catharsis, C catharsis, A authenticity, M Muse audience or Muse community. And so we started to then go into the market and just actually speak to young people and say, like, what's wrong with news? Like, why don't you watch the news? Or like, what do you think about the news? Or what could be better? And we just got a lot of really interesting stuff back. So, we were just giving real life microphones to people and saying, talk for as long as you want to about the news. And we were getting back, like, why does it have to be like left wing or right wing? Why does it have to be a guy usually or a lady? And why do they have to have that voice? And why do they have to sit behind a desk and then say, over to you, John? And, all that stuff. And so we were just designing with the feedback that we were getting from the Muse community that we'd identified. And then, and then P of the 7 steps, the CAMP campaigns, P is pain, the pain that Muse community are feeling. And, what you start to realize is what starts off as like, that's a bit of a problem, actually becomes like, and the other thing is I don't trust any news source anymore. And I don't believe that, and if I don't see it, I don't believe it. Because if it's someone standing with a microphone saying this happened yesterday, probably it didn't. And so we start to say we have to design a news source where if it's not on camera, it didn't happen. So if we can't get our reporter to be there at exactly the moment that the car drives into a bunch of protesters in Charlottesville, if we're not there, as far as we're concerned, we're not going to report on that. We can only report on what the bird's eye, the human being in the picture is seeing. And so there has to be this complete integration of what the reporter on the ground is seeing and what the audience is being told is happening. And the reporter can give a little bit more flavor of the environment and situation, but never just stand on top of a building and say, beneath us, this is happening, So that's kind of the first 4 steps really is, CAMP, of the campaign framework, which, catharsis, authenticity, Muse community, and the pain that Muse community are in. So that was kind of how we approached all the different new businesses that we started to launch, and how I've approached all of the work that, that's been successful, I think, with the brands that we've worked with as well.
And that's such a cool journey. I mean, I love I love your very disarming kind of, refreshing honesty / humor around, the artifice behind these things of trying to make it spell campaigns and all that. Like, there's so much in business, wisdom and chat and, the circuit and all of that, which is so obviously kind of post facto reasoning on things. But, and then they don't kind of acknowledge any of it, which is quite funny.
Definitely. Like, literally, that was never campaigns. It was a totally different thing. And then we just thought, if we're going to apply this to actual brands, we better flipping come up with a word that they're going to go, that's the word that we like.
And it's good communication strategy. Find a framework, make it make sense. Like fantastic. And like, it sounds like a lot of fun. And like the energy that you brought to the event and that you bring to the work you do, must be really refreshing as well with a lot of these brands and, a lot of these quite staid areas. What's it like, wandering into a boardroom of a big old company with some very set in their ways, best practice marketing, and, telling them, they're doing it wrong and helping them get to better results that actually connect more and are more about the audiences they serve and less about, the playbooks they have?
That's a great question. Honestly, I used to take the fire and brimstone approach. So I would just go in and just it was like just effing and blinding and just telling people to fuck off. And I've really kind of tried to switch that up in the past, like maybe 5 years. And obviously I'm getting a bit older as well. And I think, now I try and lead with empathy, because I think I really believe this. I swear to God, 99% of the people that you meet in brands are really good humans. They are such good humans, and they are fucking exhausted. They are exhausted. I think the reason they're exhausted is because they're going into battle every day against the dragon of attention. They're fighting against, Netflix spent 13.6 billion on content this year. The UK spent 11.2 billion on defense, right? So that's just one of the platforms, right? We are fighting. We're not competing with, Coke isn't competing with Pepsi anymore. Coke and Pepsi and every other brand is competing with every single paywalled, non-advertising system from Fortnite to Hulu to Prime Video to Spotify Premium, right? It's like, we have literally, the consumers have said, I will pay $7.99 a month so that I don't get ads. And honestly, the people in brands are good people. They're just exhausted. And so what I try and lead with is this idea, and that's why step one is catharsis, because it's like, what's it like to work here? And honestly, it doesn't take long before it's usually someone who's kind of a bit more junior, but doesn't mind just stepping up and just says, it's miserable. And everybody's shoulders go down and everybody goes, yeah, it is. It's really, really hard. And we're working till 1 o'clock in the morning and we're missing our friend's birthday party and we're missing this. And then the campaign goes out and nothing happens. And so I really started to have like a tremendous amount of empathy for them after a while and say, we've got to give them something to fight this dragon of attention with that's not just a blunt spoon, you know? So I think that those 7 steps were designed to craft the sharpest weapon possible to give you the best possible chance. Now, it's up to you how you wield it, but, you know, I think that the intention to come at things with genuine intention to contribute will always, from an evolutionary point of view, human beings have now got to the point where we are just skimming through communications and then we stop when we see something that feels like it's got nourishment value. And I know it doesn't mean it could be humor, it could be, you know, it could be just the honesty, it could be serious, it could be, but truth be told, like, you know, if you turn up to, and so mostly what I try and do with teams is say to them, guys, if your intention is to give value, I promise you the ROI is going to go through the roof, and what you'll get back, you're not even ready for. You won't even have experienced something like the network effect that you're about to create by going to a defined network, not just a demographic, but an actually defined network of people that do exist with the die-hard intention of contributing to it. That is how you create a network effect. And if you do that, it becomes a joy. Like, work becomes quite a fun thing. And the results start to flow, you know?
It's so funny, like, you know, go from being extractive to, you know, a contributor, and things might end up growing for you. It's such a lovely idea. There's a couple of final thoughts. Like, you know, as someone that's like, you know, made a lot of awesome things happen in a lot of different places by kind of putting yourself forward and then, you know, making it happen. You know, opened your own doors and created your own opportunities there. Like, what advice would you have for people who are interested in, and a lot of these things that you've done them with, they could feel far away to people. Like Fabric could feel far away. Bjork could feel far away. Hollywood could feel far away. You know, contributing and being a part of, you know, a huge Dove campaign could feel far away. Like, how do you get yourself into spots where you can then build that kind of profile?
That's a great question. I wish I had a better answer than this. I think that the most important thing is to remember that we are really living in a time that when you analyze the system, and if you can kind of imagine you're Neo and you can see the Matrix, right? In our parents' generation, we kind of had to sit around waiting for someone to pick us. You know, we needed someone's authentication or permission or patronage to move up. And I would just say, you know, there's something quite beautiful about this, because you can afford to be defiant and just say, I ain't waiting for any fucker to pick me before I go and try something. Like, we are living in a totally permissionless world now. You do not require anyone's permission to begin anything. And that's awesome. You know, that's really awesome. And if your intention is to contribute, I guarantee you whatever you put forward is going to be received in a totally different way than if your intention is just to communicate. Like, I'll give you an example, like on LinkedIn, right? I'm not very good at, but I've managed to get, you know, about 150,000 followers now, which is nothing compared to some people, but it's a lot more than I had. And I remember when I had about 5,000 followers, LinkedIn, I can't be bothered, right? And it was because all I wanted to do all the time was post about my most recent achievement. You know that post on LinkedIn where it's like, I humbly accept the honor of being the fire safety warden, right? That's not a post for anyone else. That's a post for you trying to communicate to everyone else how awesome you are. My most recent post on LinkedIn was I was searching the feed, and I found a post of a guy called Jordan who lives in Edmonton, Canada. And I want to do a shout out to him because we've become friends in the past couple of days. And he's got stage 4 cancer in his lungs, his pelvis, and his spine. He's 31 years old. And please, if you doubt me, go on my LinkedIn and have a look at this post, right? And I've never met this guy in my entire life. All I did was repost his thing, and then I said, ladies and gentlemen, by liking this post, you are agreeing to join Jordan's all clear party that we're going to have on the 1st of January 2024. It's going to be fancy dress, and it's going to be a massive global Zoom call so everybody can join, and it's at 9 p.m. GMT on the 1st of January 2024. And then the bottom of it said, I haven't met Jordan, you haven't met Jordan, and that's the fucking point, right? Now, that post, I don't even need to tell you, has fucking exploded. I got contacted by some press department from a newspaper in Canada today saying, tell us why you did that. And I didn't do it. I wrote the post in about two minutes. It wasn't considered. I didn't have a strategist there thinking through what was good. I just saw it and thought, what an absolute legend this guy is. What bravery. So I posted it. Now I've got like 500 people saying, we want to come to this party that we're going to do. And I've got people messaging me saying, why don't we do physical location parties? We're in London. We'll do it. That is what human beings are about. We respond to a certain type of energy. And all you got to do is stop thinking about how does this make me look, and do I look right, and oh, hang on a minute, because that's what we think it's about. And just fuck that stuff and just contribute in some tiny way and watch what happens.
Yeah, awesome. And as a final thought, what will success be for you?
I'm from a working class background. My parents are teachers. I was never, I remember playing we'd have water fights in the street, and everybody have like a Super Soaker 5000, and my mum would give me a bottle of milk that I should fill up with water, and I'd throw it and it'd come out my hand, and I'd end up smashing a bottle over some kid's head accidentally, right? That's, I didn't come from and so for me, I truly, truly believe, and I'm quite, fired up about this idea of, there are some seriously smart people out there, and all they need is just a tiny bit, the smallest bit of steering and maybe a little bit of, upskilling in a couple of things that, would help them get where they need to be. And so that's why I'm obsessed with this idea of digital inclusion, basically, because, I'm telling you, I live in Dubai, and I'm telling you, every Uber driver from Karachi that is driving me is smarter than me. He just hasn't got the opportunities I've got. And if he knew even some basics, he could do whatever he wanted. And that for me is a constant source of kind of sadness, but also a source of energy. And it really riles me up, and it also pushes me to go and do these digital transformation and education sessions around the world, which is that would be my dream, to just do that and not have to think about anything else.
Wonderful. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing the story today, Mark. And yeah, people, where can people go to kind of follow your journey? Is LinkedIn the spot, or how do people get involved and learn more about the digital inclusion work?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn's a good place. So it's just Mark Adams LinkedIn, but also, I just recently started a newsletter, just purely because I realized I got to this horrible point where lots of people would message me. Really smart, amazing, highly intelligent people would message me and say, hey man, can you give me some mentorship and stuff? And I really was trying to do it. And I just realized I can't do all of this. So what I thought I would do is actually create a newsletter. And actually, you won't believe this, I'm working with my mum on this, because my mum's also really super driven by this. So me and my mum are just trying to work on a newsletter that we can just put out for free and just give away everything. As far as I'm concerned, everything that I've ever learned, every mistake I've ever learned, and every win that I've ever had is somebody else's property now. I want to give every single one of those tips and tricks away, because everybody else can have them as far as I'm concerned. It's a total open API as far as I'm concerned. So I want to try and share that as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, love it. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing the story today. I hope you get a little trickle of newsletter signups from New Zealand. Awesome. So thank you, Mark Adams. Thank you to you for listening. And for everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer, Daihe Butler, do follow Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to rate and leave us a review if you like what we do. E noho rā.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz.